finally happened. After months of back and forth, headlines, and speculation, Drake just lost the lawsuit that was supposed to set the record straight. The court's decision didn't just close a legal chapter. It may have permanently rewritten how the world views his war with Kendrick Lamar. A judge has officially tossed out Drake's defamation case over Not Like Us, ruling that Kendrick's explosive lyrics weren't factual claims at all. They were non-actionable opinion, part of a rap battle. Translation? The court basically said, this is hip-hop, not a courtroom. And for Drake, that ruling hit harder than any diss track, because what started as a lyrical war on wax just ended with a legal defeat in real life, one that, for many fans, cemented Kendrick's victory on every front. But how did it get to this point? How did one diss song spiral into lawsuits, bots, streaming conspiracies, and accusations of an entire system being rigged? Let's rewind. Because the real story behind this case reveals way more than just who won the beef. It exposes how power, perception, and control collide at the top of the music industry. When Not Like Us dropped, it wasn't just another diss track. It was a cultural event. Within hours, the song exploded across every platform, dominating playlists, memes, and conversations. It became more than a record. It was a declaration, a final punch in one of the most intense rap feuds of the decade. In its first week alone, Not Like Us racked up 96 million streams, went #1 in the US, and eventually topped global charts. Critics called it the moment Kendrick ended the battle, a flawless strike that turned the entire internet into a victory parade. But what made it sting wasn't just the lyrics. It was what they represented. For years, Drake had been the undisputed heavyweight of commercial rap, chart-topping, meme-making, and algorithm-breaking. And suddenly, Kendrick, known for his lyricism and authenticity, had flipped the script. He didn't just beat Drake in bars, he beat the system Drake helped build. Fans called it a generational shift. Analysts called it poetic justice. And as the record shattered streaming records, the world seemed united in one idea. Kendrick won. But not everyone believed that victory was entirely organic. Behind the scenes, Drake's camp started asking questions about numbers that felt too perfect, playlists that seemed too strategic, and algorithms that appeared a little too friendly toward Kendrick. Because for Drake, the story didn't end with Not Like Us dominating the charts. It started there. Not long after Not Like Us took over the world, Drake made his first unexpected move. Instead of dropping another track, he dropped a legal threat. Through his company, Frozen Moments, LLC, Drake filed what's called a pre-action petition, basically a legal request to preserve evidence before filing a full lawsuit. And the details were wild. In that petition, Drake accused his own label, Universal Music Group, of secretly helping Kendrick's track climb the charts. Not through fan demand, but through manipulation. He claimed Universal, in partnership with Spotify, used bots, backdoor deals, and algorithm tricks to artificially boost Not Like Us into viral territory. According to Drake's team, this wasn't luck, it was a campaign. They alleged that Universal slashed royalty rates by nearly 30%, making it cheaper for Spotify to recommend the song more often. There were even whispers about paid bot farms, people claiming they got $2,500 to run endless streams of Kendrick's record. And it didn't stop there. Some fans started reporting weird glitches, like asking Apple's voice assistant to play Drake's album Certified Lover Boy, only to hear Not Like Us instead. To Drake's supporters, that felt like proof something strange was happening. Behind closed doors, his lawyers argued that streaming is a zero-sum game. When one artist gets boosted, another gets buried. And in their eyes, that's exactly what happened. Universal fired back immediately, calling the claims offensive and absurd. They said Drake's success came from fans for over a decade, and now he couldn't accept that someone else outplayed him. To them, Not Like Us wasn't fake, it was phenomenal. And even though this first filing wasn't a full-blown lawsuit yet, it revealed something deeper. Drake wasn't just fighting a song, he was fighting a system he thought had turned against him. But the real twist? Instead of backing down, he doubled down. and the next move would change the entire narrative. By the start of this year, it was clear Drake wasn't done. The pre-action petition, meant to quietly gather evidence, had turned into a public spectacle. And instead of fading away, Drake took things one step further. In January 2025, he officially filed a defamation lawsuit against Universal Music Group, the very same company that had powered his career for over a decade. And that's what made this move so shocking. Drake wasn't suing Kendrick, he was suing his own label. According to the filing, Drake claimed Universal had allowed and even encouraged the spread of damaging falsehoods, not just through the song Not Like Us, but through what he described as a machine built to humiliate him. His argument was simple. The label didn't just stand by while he was attacked, they amplified it. For Drake, this wasn't just about bruised ego. He believed the whole system, the streaming algorithms, the playlists, the PR cycles, had been turned against him. From his perspective, he wasn't suing for revenge. He was trying to expose a rigged game. But that's where things got complicated. Because critics pointed out one big flaw. Drake is the machine. He's benefited from that same system his entire career, from radio pushes to global rollouts to algorithmic playlists. To suddenly claim it was corrupt when it didn't favor him? To many people, that felt ironic. And that irony became part of the narrative. The public began to see the lawsuit less as a bold stand and more as a desperate move. A superstar trying to fight a cultural loss through the courts instead of through music. But for Drake, it wasn't about losing. It was about legacy. He wanted to rewrite how this moment would be remembered. Not as a defeat, but as a fight against corruption. The problem was, the courtroom doesn't run on perception. It runs on proof. And that's where his case began to unravel. Once Drake's defamation suit hit the headlines, Universal Music Group wasted no time firing back. Their lawyers called the lawsuit an attack on artistic freedom, claiming it had no basis in reality. To them, Not Like Us wasn't defamation. It was art. Their core argument was simple. Rap battles aren't courtroom testimony. Diss tracks, by nature, are filled with exaggeration, metaphor, and provocation. No reasonable person, they argued, would take lyrics like, say Drake, I hear you like 'em young, as literal fact. It was wordplay, not evidence. And here's where Drake's case started to crack. Because to prove defamation, you need to show that a statement was false, damaging, and believed to be factual by the public. But in rap, hyperbole is the point. It's lyrical warfare, not journalism. The irony ran deep. Drake himself had built a career off clever disses and sly insinuations. He'd weaponized rumors and punchlines more times than anyone could count. So when he claimed Kendrick's bars crossed a line, the courts saw it as part of the same game he'd played for years. Universal's team used that against him. They referenced his own diss record, Tailor-Made Freestyle, where Drake used an AI-generated Tupac voice to taunt Kendrick, even bringing up the same young girls theme Kendrick later flipped back at him. That connection turned out to be crucial. It showed that Kendrick's line wasn't inventing an accusation. It was responding to one. And in that moment, the narrative shifted. What Drake's lawyers framed as slander, Universal reframed as context. They argued that Kendrick's lyrics weren't spreading falsehoods. They were a response within an ongoing cultural exchange, protected as expression under the First Amendment. That's the trap Drake fell into. By taking a lyrical war into a courtroom, he blurred the line between art and accusation, and that made his entire case vulnerable. Because once the court started treating rap as artistic speech, not factual claim, the outcome was practically sealed. But the judge didn't just dismiss the argument. She made an example out of it. After months of speculation, the verdict finally dropped. Judge Jeanette Vargas officially dismissed Drake's defamation lawsuit, and her reasoning cut deep. In a 38-page ruling, she declared that Kendrick's lyrics couldn't reasonably be seen as factual claims. They were part of what she called a heated artistic exchange. She wrote that any reasonable listener would understand the feud as a war of words, not a documentary. In other words, rap beef isn't evidence. It's entertainment. The judge even cited examples from both artists. She pointed out that Drake himself had fired first with tailor-made freestyle, mocking Kendrick using an AI-generated Tupac voice, a move that blurred lines between parody and provocation. So when Kendrick responded with, "Say Drake, I hear you like I'm young," the court saw it as contextual retaliation, not defamation. That single detail became the heart of the decision. Because Kendrick's line wasn't born from thin air. It was a lyrical echo, a response to Drake's own words. And in that context, the judge ruled, it could only be understood as opinion, not accusation. Drake's team tried to argue that the track went beyond art, that it damaged his reputation globally and created a false narrative, but the court wasn't convinced. Even apparent statements of fact, the judge wrote, can be opinion when they occur in a public feud. That phrasing crushed the foundation of Drake's case. The judge was essentially saying, you entered the ring. You can't complain about getting hit. After the dismissal, Universal Music Group released a blunt statement calling the lawsuit an affront to artistic expression. They said it never should have gone this far and reaffirmed that they'd continue working with Drake despite the fallout. A diplomatic way of saying, business is business. Drake's spokesperson, meanwhile, announced that he planned to appeal the ruling, insisting the court misunderstood the real damage caused by the label's alleged manipulation. But publicly, it didn't land that way. To most fans, the loss wasn't just legal, it was symbolic. Because at that moment, it became official. In both music and the courtroom, Kendrick Lamar had won. When the judge's gavel came down, the internet reacted instantly. Memes, think pieces, reaction videos. The verdict spread faster than any press release ever could. To most fans, it was simple. Drake lost again, not just in music, but in the court of law, and maybe even in the court of public opinion. But beneath the headlines, this moment revealed something bigger than a feud. Because this was never really just Drake versus Kendrick. It was Drake versus the system. The same system that made him the most streamed artist of the decade, and the same one he later accused of betraying him. That contradiction is what makes this story so fascinating. Drake built his empire inside the machine, then turned around and claimed it was rigged. And whether you believe his accusations or not, that irony will always hang over this case. To some, it looks like hypocrisy. To others, it looks like a wake-up call. A rare glimpse at how messy the music industry's power games really are. Because, let's be real, Not Like Us didn't just win because it was catchy. It hit a nerve. It represented a cultural shift, fans choosing authenticity over algorithms, soul over strategy. And for once, it felt like the internet itself decided who came out on top. That's what makes Drake's lawsuit feel so symbolic. It wasn't just about bots or royalties. It was about narrative control. About trying to rewrite how history would remember this moment. And in a strange way, that makes sense. Drake's always been hyper-aware of legacy. He doesn't just make music. He curates his myth. But this time, the story slipped out of his hands. Because when a legal loss reinforces a cultural one, perception becomes permanent. And in this case, Kendrick's victory didn't just survive the courtroom. It got stronger because of it. Still, one question remains. Was Drake wrong for trying to expose what he believed was manipulation? Or was he just fighting a losing battle against a system too big to beat? Whatever side you're on, one thing's undeniable. This feud didn't just change two artists. It changed how we see the entire industry. And years from now, when people look back at the Drake versus Kendrick saga, they won't just remember who had the better verse. They'll remember who stood their ground, and who tried to rewrite the ending. So what do you think? Was this about justice, or about pride? Let me know in the comments. And if you've made it this far, hit that like button. Because this story might be over, but the conversation is just getting started.